Hey, it's Soleil, and this is episode 170 of the Orange Pill Investor. And today I want to talk about my favorite stock right now and of all time, and that's MicroStrategy. But I have to talk about specifically why I will not hold this stock forever. And the reason, quite simply, is because it's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is decentralized and secure. It basically cannot be stopped. I guess if I had to, just at least keep an open mind that there's some kind of existential threat that I'm not aware of, I would say that there's like a 0.1% chance that Bitcoin could fail or whatever. And that number is getting smaller every day as more people join the network and make the Bitcoin network even stronger and more secure than it was when before they joined. So I think Jeff was it Jeff Booth? I think he even gave Vitalik Buterin of all people credit for coming up with the trilemma that cryptocurrencies have. The three sides are you can make a particular piece of crypto decentralized, secure, or scalable, and you have to pick two. You can't get all three. And since Bitcoin is decentralized and secure, we have to look to layer 2 and 3 for scalability. uh, Vitalik apparently did not realize that he disproved his own coin with that bit of a revelation, and basically every other coin, because even if you created a better Bitcoin, what you thought was a better Bitcoin, it's still going to be the new guy on the block. So it's going to have a shorter chain. So it's not going to be as secure as Bitcoin, and it doesn't have the network effects. So it's just kind of automatically guaranteed to be a loser. Bitcoin's a one-time deal, and everybody else that thinks that they have built the new Bitcoin have not. The only Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and since Bitcoin really can't be attacked on layer one anymore, they missed their chance on that. The only thing that the people that are at the top of the current, well, excuse me, I guess I'm just going to start calling them the old system. The only thing that they have left, and if you listen to any Jeff Booth, you can probably just tell I have been as well, because it's whoever I'm listening to in the Bitcoin space is kind of who I sound like. I'm reminded of Stephen King's book on writing, and he said when he first started writing, he just wrote like whoever he was reading. So if he was just immersed in a particular classic author, then just his brain kind of switched over and it was just kind of copycatting. So maybe none of these thoughts are original. I don't know, but inspired by some of the stuff that Jeff Booth is talking about, if Bitcoin can't be destroyed at layer one, then they have to go to layer two. And he mentioned that they'll probably attack Lightning or whatever. And actually, one of the very first Bitcoin critics that I remember making some sense, and not a lot of Bitcoiners had an answer for this. He was critical of Bitcoin and especially Lightning because he thought of Lightning as kind of the almost like banks. And so banks centralize power, and one thing that they do is they kind of just siphon a little bit, with fees here and there, and your money goes into the bank and out of the bank, and they'll just hit you with all these little fees. And so they're kind of just don't really care what the whole economic system does as long as they're able to just profit off of the traffic. And he was worried about Bitcoin suffering the same fate. Like, what if all the banks are the ones that have all the money, or have enough money that they can just dominate the Lightning network, and everyone using the channels are basically just funneling a tiny little few sats at a time, but kind of like calculus is just, once you aggregate millions of tiny, tiny, tiny fractions, they'll add up to large sums eventually. And his worry was that the current people who are in power now will be able to use something like the Lightning Network, or something like it, to just siphon the fees from the traffic by operating these nodes. And he kind of thought, okay, well, these Lightning nodes are just going to be like the banks of the future, and eventually we'll all be Bitcoin poor from buying a Snickers bar with the Lightning Network and paying like one sat at a time. But after hundreds of millions of one sat transactions occur, you know, Bitcoin will be starting to become centralized in the nodes controlling those transactions. So I don't know if there's a solution to that, but Jeff Booth's point still stands in that since the people who don't want to lose their power in the old system are kind of trying to maintain that power and stranglehold while everyone is exiting that system and moving over to the new system, which is finally an honest ledger. It's called Bitcoin. They will attack layer 2, and I'm sure they'll attack every single layer on top of that. And I don't know what layer MicroStrategy is in. Uh, Maybe in the future I'll do better research before I start recording. But it really doesn't matter for the point. So MicroStrategy is a Bitcoin derivative. It's a stock asset, and they've basically loaded their bags full of Bitcoin. And so it's my favorite. It's my favorite non-Bitcoin asset because it's basically leveraged Bitcoin, and that leveraging, they've basically let the cat out of the bag. I mean, everyone knows what their strategy is. Their strategy is to leverage even more and more and more. They get favorable loan rates. And so that's why I hold this asset. And I committed the cardinal sin of actually selling some Bitcoin in order to buy more MicroStrategy during the bear market. Actually, I guess it was the beginning of the bull market, because you know, I have fairly strong conviction that I can see where this is going, especially after watching a bunch of Quant Bros episodes. It's hard not to get my hopes up. But if I apply the same litmus test to MicroStrategy that I do Bitcoin, and I say, okay, is MicroStrategy decentralized and secure? I guess it's scalable. Um, there's always going to be a market. There's going to be a bid and an ask. But to a certain extent, it's not even I guess they would have to issue some more shares or something to make it even more scalable, or do a stock split or something. But they always have that ability. But it's definitely not decentralized. It's centralized around Michael Saylor for sure. And it's not secure in the same sense that Bitcoin is secure. I'm sure they take insane steps to secure uh, their company and their assets. And they're even coming out with the DID solution, so that people's virtual online presences can be verified. Don't trust, verify. So they can be commended for that. But the asset that they hold is decentralized and secure, but they themselves are not decentralized and secure. If Michael Saylor steps in front of a bus and somebody else who's not as knowledgeable or not as laser eyes focused as Sailor is, they may not do as good of a job at implementing the strategy as he was. So that was a long ass way of me explaining why I don't trust any non-Bitcoin asset forever. So I will be getting what I can during the bull market, and then I will be getting out and getting and getting something else of value. And I don't know if that's going to be using the profits to start a business or purchasing a metric ass ton of Tesla stock. They're the only asset that I'm kind of grateful that they own some Bitcoin, so I don't have to be a complete hypocrite. I can call them a Bitcoin related asset, or Bitcoin related derivative. But I would be lying if I said that much of their valuation is attributed to their Bitcoin holdings. Their valuation comes from obviously cars for now, but AI, full self-driving, energy, and an army of humanoid robots. So that's kind of my master plan. Is I'm hoping that during the bull markets, I'll just peel off some MicroStrategy, and then I'll buy some Tesla. And then during the bear markets, hopefully Tesla will be pumping, and I will flip flop, and I'll, buy MicroStrategy in anticipation of the next bull market. And I don't know how many cycles I would continue to do that. I can't imagine I would need to do that much more than 5 years. I would certainly, if this works even for one cycle, I definitely won't be working my 9 to 5 after 2025. That's has a nice ring to it. No 95, no 9 to 5 after 2025. Maybe that'll be my battle cry. But I hope this doesn't get my irresponsibly long MicroStrategy membership card revoked. But uh, I don't know that I will be exiting 100% of a MicroStrategy position ever, because there's just too many. It has too many things going for it. So I don't know if I would ever exit completely. But at the very least, at the end of 2025, I would become very aggressive with my covered calls. Like right now, I've got the 1400 strike when the price was around 1200. I tried to get 20% call away value in, and that's what I generally do. Actually, it's right here. I had this loaded up. So the price was around 1220, I think, when I sold this. I wanted to go to the 1440, but I couldn't quite get 1% call away value at 1440. So I sacrificed a little bit of call away value to make sure that I got that 1% premium. And that's the way that I set up. That's my setup mechanic, is I try to get at least 1% premium for the week, and I I kind of see what call away value I can get there, and then I can slide the strikes up or down, compromising between those two goals. So I can start with trying to get the call away value, or I can start with the premium that I want and then work in either direction. It really doesn't matter. But this out of the money percent basically means that 80% of the time, or 4/5 of the time, I'll just keep this premium. This is not an exact number; it's just a prediction, but it's fairly accurate actually. You can kind of use the delta as similar. So 22% chance this goes out of the money, or 80% chance out of the money. Tasty Trade's kind of just doing the calculation for you. Um, Sorry, 80% chance that it's out of money, 20% chance that it doesn't. So that means that 80% of the time I keep all the premium. The price is either 1400 or below. But the other 20% of the time, I get all of the upside from the 1200 price up to the 1400 price. And there's 52 trading weeks a year. So 20% of that is going to be about 10 weeks. So 10 weeks out of the year, not only do I keep the 1%, but my account appreciates 10%. Now, of course, the chart looks like this. So sometimes you get that 10% and then you lose the 10%. You get the 10%, you lose the 10%, you get 20%, you lose 30%. So of course that's all happening. But the point is, it's not sacrificing all of the upside. About 20% of the time, I'm not just capturing the guaranteed premium, I'm also capturing this 10, 15, 20% call away value. And then at the same time, that 20% also means that that's how often I should expect to quote unquote lose a trade and not capture all of the premium. Have the my shares have, at least be threatened to be called away. I should be having to deal with that at least 20% of the time. So once every 5 weeks, I should have to make a decision. Do I let my shares get called away or do I pay to roll? So make sure you have your plan for when that happens. Or if you cannot stomach MicroStrategy shares getting called away, then you don't sell covered calls against them. Or if you want to give yourself some insurance, if there's a 20% chance this will get called away and you think that it might go to 1500, then you would need the difference between, I'm sorry, let's do like 1600. Then the difference between 1400 and 1600 is 200. That means you'd have to come up with 20 grand to roll that call. And at 1600, at 1600, oh, sorry, the other way around. 20 grand divided by 1600. You'd need 12 and a half shares that you could sell at 1600 a pop in order to cover that 20 grand. So for every 100 shares, you'd have to have 12 and a half. If you thought if MicroStrategy rips, it'll probably rip to 1600. You would need, the price goes to 1800, you'd need, I don't know, double that maybe. Or, and people, one share is one delta. So some people might say, okay, that you need 12 and a half delta to protect that covered call. But since I'm so bullish on MicroStrategy, I have started actually buying leaps, and you can still measure your leaps by its delta component. Yeah, let me just look at my position. So I've got, 2 February 21st leaps, and the combined delta on those is 33. So each one of these probably has about a 16 and a half delta. So if I thought MicroStrategy was going to rip to 1600, one of these would cover that upside. Now, I may have actually, because I've gotten burnt on MicroStrategy ripping above my strike so so violently, I may have started to overinsure these because I'm down about 2.5 grand on each of these. I'm down about 5 grand on all 6 of these. And I just, I've been dollar cost averaging as MicroStrategy's been kind of crashing. So these I haven't really lost anything on these. The price is pretty steady on these. Actually, might be up $100, whatever. But if MicroStrategy does rip, I would profit greatly from these. But when the price drops, the price crashes. So long calls are extremely risky, and I don't really make this the focus of my strategy. But I'm so bullish on MicroStrategy until end of 2025 that this actually made sense to me. So we'll see if the strategy works. Um, I did actually sell off. I had 6 of these, I believe. It was either 4 or 6. And I did peel off some of these for profit um, when MicroStrategy had pumped. And my trade price was 5 grand. I sold some for 10, maybe another couple for 12 or something like that. The price actually ended up getting up close to, I think, 15 or 18, maybe at one point. But I didn't want to sell off my last 2 because then I wouldn't have had insurance if the price of MicroStrategy went to 2,000 or 2,500 again. And so I rode this all the way back down uh from a $15,000 valuation down to 2. So lost what, 90%, 75, 90% of its value. So that's not optimal, but um, that's just how you can look at measuring how many deltas you need to cover your upside in a position that you do not want shares called away in. Now your estimate could also be wrong. So, I'm saying I did this estimate based on if MicroStrategy goes to 1600, but if it goes to 1800, then these 12 and a half shares ain't going to cut it. You're still getting them called away. So it's still just a guessing game. And I know for some, getting their MicroStrategy called away is absolutely terrifying. But I'm not really beholden to MicroStrategy like I am Bitcoin. And I almost even feel a little weird trading in the stock market and calling myself a Bitcoin maximalist. Um, I assume 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, I will just completely exit the system. And maybe if there's a fully functioning options market in Bitcoin itself, and I don't have to use these derivatives, maybe I'll just be doing that. But with MicroStrategy being a leveraged Bitcoin play, I'm always still gonna in a bullish environment, I'm still gonna have that pull as far as I can tell. But maybe not. Maybe I've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the system, and eventually I'll just exit completely. Until we have all of the financial tools we need to do that, I'll be doing this, and I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It almost kind of feels like a video game. So I think I was born a little too early to get paid to play video games full time. Esports wasn't really a thing back in the 80s and 90s. So this is the next best thing. I guess this is the second best is selling options. So that just, and it doesn't have to be MicroStrategy, but those are the mechanics that I use. So I just did some CLSK positions. And if I was just going to sell cash secured puts, I just sell out the money. I don't even screw around trying to figure out what strikes to do. But if I owned 100 shares of CLSK right now, paid 15.50 for it, I'd probably go to the 16.50 or the 17 strike. Collect at least 1% here, almost 1% there. 1.5% here and get between what 5 and 10% call away value, and then use those profits to either buy more shares of CLSK, or I wonder what the cheapest calls are at the top of the chain. Okay, so you'd have to save up your weekly premiums for quite a while to be able to afford. This sleeps at the end of 2020, or excuse me, beginning of 2026. But right here, how much would this cost? Yeah, $300 there. So you'd have to save up quite a bit to be able to buy some of these deep out of the money calls. Riot is still cheap. Let's see. Yeah, top of the Riot chain in 2026 cost you about $175. So that's not terribly cost prohibitive. And this would get you 0.37 delta, which means that for every dollar that the price of Riot goes up, this option price would go up 37 cents. So if the price of Riot goes up from 940 to 1040, the price of this option would go up from, let's see, the mid price is 175, so it would go up plus 37. So 205 plus 7, 212. And before I go, I've been doing this since way before MicroStrategy was even an idea in my head. And this is how I've been doing it. And I'm basically, making more money doing this every week than I do in my 9 to 5. So I'm technically work optional, but I'm gonna try to milk that 9 to 5 for another year or so, and you know, just pay the bills with the job and put all of the profits from my trading back into more shares and more leaps and more covered calls and more cash secured puts, just so I can see how much I can compound that and really be able to retire next year in a blaze of glory. But in general, if I'm only collecting 1% a week, then I can buy one share a week. And it takes 50 weeks to get to 100 shares. And then after that, I got 200 shares, and it only takes 34 weeks buying 3 shares a week, and on and on and on. So even just starting with 100 shares after 11 years, you know, you got $1,000, you buy 100 shares of Riot. In 11 years, if the stars align and you're able to, get the maximum number of shares, I mean, that's a fantasy. But this is just showing the potential of why I do this. In 11 years, I would potentially be able to amass 10,000 shares. And now I'm not just buying a few shares a week. I could buy 100 shares a week, which would mean now I'm not just getting 1% a week, which is 52% a year. Now the calculation is 1.01 to the 52nd power, which is 67% returns a year. So I call this reaching critical mass, and this is what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And so every week I just roll my winnings back into more covered calls and sell more and more. But this is the conservative. This is the conservative play. But every once in a while, there's some pretty risky ones, and you can get 2, 3, 4% sometimes per week. And of course, in that case, it happens much faster. Getting 4% a week, you could get to critical mass in just a little over 2 years, 109 weeks. But that's not a very realistic scenario. I mean, except with MicroStrategy, it's kind of not that unrealistic. Selling cash secured puts right now, and this is only 4 days. Mid price is 4,600. When I checked this on Friday, it was about 4%. So even that is not completely unheard of. So despite my absolute love for MicroStrategy, there's no stock that I like better. There will be times when Tesla goes absolutely nuts, and that's why it's the other asset that I hold. It's probably maybe 20% of my portfolio. MicroStrategy is the other. It's like 70. And Tesla's been on a nice tear lately, so that's been fun. But I'm basically just using them as a pairs trade. I just trade in and out because I don't want to trade into cash. Cash is suffering catastrophic losses to inflation all the time. So Tesla seems like a better store of value than US dollars to me at this point. But they're not centralized or secure either. So these are just all, side pieces to my main squeeze, Bitcoin. All right. That's about it. That is why I'm all in on MicroStrategy, but all in for now, not forever. All right. Be good, y'all.